Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate your time. My colleagues, please help folks to enter into the room, Molly, if you are able to. But thanks again for being here. I do see a lot of known faces, but a lot of new faces, which is really what we wanted in this conversation. So welcome. We really appreciate your time. My name is Sanjita Pradhan. I am the Director of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion at the Greater Des Moines Partnership. I really want to welcome you, and on behalf of my team members here, Tim, Becky, Molly, there's a few others. And so we're going to go ahead and get started today in this very new series that we're launching, Your DEI Journey, beginning your DEI journey. We are at a very critical moment in time. Yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And the whole idea and the need for the work for diversity, equity, and inclusion has been elevated. While the demand for social justice started in the streets and in the public front, we know that this made its way to our boardrooms and our workplaces. And we don't exist in vacuum. People have to live, work, and play in the same place. And so it's very important for us to be inclusive. I have noticed that a lot of our members are really interested in starting a DEI program or ramping up their efforts, and this is all great news. But we also know that there are folks that we really need to reach. There are lots of people who are new to this conversation, and so we wanted to provide this platform for folks who are in this journey, no matter where you're at, especially if you're just in the beginning stages of the journey, to learn the very basic things about DEI. And so I want to thank my colleagues, Tim Perkins and Becky Cody, for leading that effort within our Inclusion Council. I do have just a quick couple of polls to start us with, and then I will pass it on to my colleague, Tim Perkins. So let me see if my poll would work. Here we go. If you want to engage with us just for a few minutes. So first question is, does your organization have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program or an initiative? Okay, that's great. It's about very high percentage, 80% or so. We have something, some 13%. We don't have anything, and then about very small percentage, I don't know. So that's great. Oh, I need to share the results with you. Here we are. All right, so I'll close this poll. Thank you for sharing that. I have a couple other questions, but hopefully I loaded it correctly that it will show up. And I don't think it is. So I might not have done it properly. But anyhow, so thanks for engaging in that. I will turn this over to my colleague, Tim Perkins, who is going to share with you a little bit about the broad definitions of diversity, equity, inclusion. Then we have a very fantastic panel of employers who are in these different places in their journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion, who will share a little bit about that journey. Please feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat, and we will love to open it up for questions. As you might have seen in the registration page, we will have an opportunity for all of us to go into little breakout rooms and have a little bit more conversation. So, Tim?
Thanks, Sanjita, and thanks for our employer panel, Tracy, Greg, and Holly. We appreciate it. Thanks to the Education and Action Committee for everything that they've done. All I wanted to go real quick, as we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it gets complicated. There's a lot of nuances, similarities, some overlap, and it can get a little confusing, and so people have a tendency to avoid it. Just the name changes alone can make your head spin a little bit as it evolves. So initially this started off, you had diversity and inclusion only, and now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I just want to take a second and kind of define those for you. So I'll do a bit of reading so I don't mess up the definition, because that can be just as bad when you're trying to do these things. So diversity includes, but it isn't limited to race, color, ethnicity, nationality, religion, social economic status, veteran status, education, marital status, language, age, gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation, mental or physical ability, genetic information, and learning styles. And even diversity, the term has broadened out. It used to be, we talked about diversity, it was race, ethnicity, male, female, gender, and that was kind of what it was limited to. And you can see the definitions expanded a lot. Now factors like the social economic status or gender identity are considered when we reference diverse populations. So with this broad definition, including everybody's varied identities, are considered. So now, inclusion is authentically bringing traditionally excluded individuals or group into processes, activities, and decision and policy making in a way that shares power and ensures equal access to opportunity and resources. There's a diversity advocate, Verna Myers, who coined the phrase, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is when you're being asked to dance. So it's really good an example of inclusion. Another one is consider the employee employees are encouraged to go on an activity, but when that employee arrives, they find out that the facility is not even wheelchair accessible. Okay, inclusion is making sure everybody can participate. Now, equity is the guarantee of fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement of all while striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. The principle of equity acknowledges that there are historically underserved and underrepresented populations and that fairness regarding these unbalanced conditions is needed to assist equality in the provision of effective opportunities to all groups. I know that's a lot, but here's a good example. The Equal Pay for Women campaign. That's a real simple example where it was showing equity. Why are women getting paid less than men for doing the same job with the same skills? So a lot of companies, including Apple, are going through checking their compensation packages, salaries, et cetera, to make sure that they're equal based on positions and not on gender. So equity is an approach which ensures that everyone is getting equal opportunities to grow and showcase their skills and talent. Equity acknowledges the fact that barriers and advantages exist in each person's life, and as a result, not everyone starts from the same place. That's one of the big things. I'm a little older. I'm in my 50s. We used to, always talk about affirmative action, and people felt that was an unfair advantage. Equity is not about giving anybody an unfair advantage. It's giving everybody the same opportunities and making sure they have access to those opportunities. So in the end, diversity and inclusion are the outcomes of the strategies implemented in the organization. On the other hand, equity is the process in which an organization engages in to provide growth opportunities to people with marginalized identities. So society has been evolving to acknowledge the fact that, basically not everybody has the same opportunities to begin with, but we as organizations, companies, nonprofits can ensure the fact that we're making the playing field level by identifying things that put up artificial barriers, any biases that may be in place that are preventing people from getting these same opportunities. And our company representatives, our panel, I'm sure we'll discuss why they started it, what the advantages are to it. And what's in it for me is anytime we make things better for for any group, it makes it better for everybody. When you identify certain things that are biased, it can be something that's affecting age or a particular group, but it's going to cross over to everyone because it eliminates those barriers. So I'll turn it back over to my colleague, Sanjita. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that, Tim. And I just want to mention that we will be sending some additional attachments for you as visuals and takeaways after this meeting. I think it was a lot, but this is a complex issue, and there's a lot of different terms and complex terminologies that we need to understand. So we're just beginning to start talk about that. I think my colleague Mike Jefferson has the other polls up. Mike, are you able to get the other polls up? Right, there we go. So if you can engage in a few other questions with us on a scale of 1 to 10, how knowledgeable do you feel about the topics of DEI? Okay. As expected, I guess it's all over the place, where some of us were very, very new, which is awesome because we want to talk to you. Sometimes in this work, we feel like we're preaching to the choir, and we can get folks who we understand. But really, it's intentional. Our team members, Becky, Tim, Erica, there's multiple other people, Mary Hunter, I see on the call, work really intentionally build us to make sure that we bring in people who are new to this work, who don't have a place to go and say, you know what, I'm new to this work. I need to learn. What should I need to learn, right? And so thank you for being here. How about the next question, Mike? We got the same. Oh, here it's different. On a scale of 1 to 10, now tell us how well you think your organization is doing around DEI. Awesome. I think, again, as expected, we're all of us personally and organizationally are in this journey. Some are a little ahead of us, some are starting in the middle, and some of us are starting. It's really encouraging to see that a very large majority of you feel like your organization is, right there at number 7, which is really awesome. We would love to hear from you if you want to share best practices in your organization that you feel like, hey, this is something we've learned in our organization. This will benefit all the others who are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'd love to hear from you, okay? So feel free to reach out to me. We'd love to hear blogs on it. We have a podcast that we want to highlight your journey and your best practices, and we could do, we could figure out ways to incorporate some of this in our future webinars. Maybe there's one last question, Mike, or are we done?
That was all the poll questions.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much. Now we get into the meat and potatoes of our event today, where I'm really excited to have you are in for a treat. We have some amazing organization and leaders who are going to be brave and vulnerable in sharing a little bit about their DEI journey. We know this work is difficult. We know this is not an easy ride. We know this is not a piece of cake. And we hope that this learning from other organizations and hearing from other organizations who've been in this journey, either at the starting point, in the midpoint, or little advanced, that you feel encouraged to be that champion, to take it back to your organization, to continue this work professionally and personally. And so I'd like to introduce our 3 panelists that we have today. And I'd like to start with introducing Holly Cleaver. She's Chief Operating Officer at Girl Scouts of Greater Iowa. Next, we have Tracy Gibson, who is the Vice President and Treasurer of, I am so sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one, Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at Andersen Windows. And last but not least, we have Greg Blythe, Vice President and Treasurer of IMT Insurance. Welcome, panelists. Welcome. Thank you so very much for giving us your time and sharing a little bit with us today about the journey that you're in. So maybe we'll start in the same order that we went with. Holly, maybe we'll start with you and say, can you start off by just introducing your company? Tell us a little bit about what your company is about, and then we can go with Tracy and Greg.
Yep, thanks, Sanjita. My name is Holly Cleaver. I'm the COO at Girl Scouts of Greater Iowa. So our mission as an organization is to build girls of courage, confidence, and character who make the world a better place. And we do that through leadership and skill building activities for girls in grades K through 12. So we have about 50 employees, 4 offices, and about 10,000 members. We cover basically the western 2/3 of Iowa. And we have a really strong volunteer base. So most of our programming and our services for girls are delivered through volunteers.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracy Gibson. I'm the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for Andersen Windows and Doors. We are the largest window and door manufacturer in North America. We have more than 10,000 employees, and our vision is to really make the world a better place so that We are living up to our promise that everyone benefits from being associated with Andersen. We're headquarters in Minnesota. We have more than 30 locations around the country, and we operate in 3 countries, the United States, Canada, and Italy. Thank you, and I look forward to being with you today.
Awesome. Greg.
Hello, everybody. I'm Greg Blythe. As Sanjita said, I'm the VP of Accounting and Treasurer here at IMT Insurance. And so we are a mid-sized insurance company based here in Des Moines, Iowa. We write insurance for both personal lines and commercial lines in the upper Midwest. We also provide software solutions for small county mutual insurance companies throughout the entire country. So we have both an upper Midwest presence largely, but also have a little bit of national outreach. And from that standpoint, we've been around for about 140 years coming up on. So we've been around in this area for a long time. We're not a huge company, have just over 300 employees, but we certainly have a long history in the areas that we serve. I'm looking forward to being here as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I think audiences, you have been noticing, and you notice that I think we have some companies that we wouldn't really associate with, like, oh, they have a great DEI program. Like we have a nonprofit whose mission is to serve girls, but also wanting to be more inclusive and how do I serve everybody? And then Tracy, when I learned about Andersen Windows having a chief diversity officer, I was like, what? It was some unexpected, but really happy surprise. And then IMT, insurance. We do have lots of big business. When we think about DEI work, we feel like there's big businesses, right? Nationwide, Wells Fargo, Walmart, obviously they have it. It's really great to see mid-sized businesses being very thoughtful about going in this journey. So maybe we can go around and talk a little bit about where are you in the journey? What prompted you to start diversity, equity, inclusion? Why? Why did you think about this is something we need to invest our time, energy, resources in? I think we'll go in the same order and we'll switch our order at some point.
Okay, so at Girl Scouts of Greater Iowa, we are really in the beginning of this journey. So as a national movement, Girl Scouts has this long history of inclusion and wanting to serve every girl. But as far as our local organization, we really just started doing this intentional work a year ago. And we definitely were prompted by the murder of George Floyd and all of the social momentum around that last summer. And we really just started by asking ourselves, what can we be doing better as an organization? And then the first step was really kind of an open and transparent invitation to all of our staff and saying, this is an area where we recognize we can do better, we want to do better. And we asked for staff who are interested in basically starting a task force, looking at what can we do to be an anti-racist organization? What would that mean? What would that look like? And so those were some of our initial steps. And I think I can get more into the next steps after that and some of the other questions.
Yeah, thank you.
So for Andersen Windows and Doors, I've been with the company for 18 months. But prior to my joining the company, they've been on a journey for 18 months. So that's about how long we've been working on this for the company. I'm not sure where to say where we are on the journey, right? There are so many great things that are happening, and I'm happy to share more about them in this conversation. But depending on where you look in the organization, there are some people who I can say are transformational. There are some, people in the organization that are just starting. And when I think about this work, I bucket our employees as we have a group of employees that are passionate about this work and they're out on the front lines and they're helping. We have a group of employees who are like sitting there in the middle. They know this is the right thing to do. They are not doing anything unless we prompt them to do it. And frankly, we have a group of employees who would have been at the Capitol on January 6th and participating in those efforts as well. And so when we look around and look at why did we start and what's the importance of it, really, it's really about talent. We need people to come and work in our organization and do the jobs that we need done in order to produce windows and doors so everyone has a safe home to be in with nice windows and doors to be able to look at the life you like, enjoy the life that you have, right? So it's really about potential talent. It's really about engagement. It's really about retention. And frankly, in my point of view, it's about profits. How do we get out to some of these diverse communities that we're leaving the money on the table because we don't have those relationships and partnerships? And so I think you also asked a question about how do we get started? So once, and you're right, Holly, our efforts accelerated at the murder of George Floyd. We were already working in this space, but that is when we got clear and focused. So it starts to me with information gathering. It starts with understanding your data, understanding your metrics, understanding where you're starting from, so your baseline, but also having a voice of the employee. Definition of terms. So thanks so much, Tim, for starting us out with the definition of terms. It's really about organizational readiness. It's about buy-in and support at all levels, but you have to have support from the very top of the house. It's about a commitment. You have to have the resources. You have to have a budget. You can't just say, I'm going to work on this space and then not provide resources and budget. And then it's all about the metrics and the communication and how are you going to get the word out on this?
Thank you, Tracy. I think I have some additional questions for you about if I may take a minute, Greg, from your time.
Sure.
You talked about talent and profits. What would you say to folks who say, this is a nice thing to do and that's why we're doing? Is that a good argument? Is that enough argument? Is that, where does that come in your organization?
So a lot of our leaders talk in that language. And so when I push back to say, why is it the right thing to do? And I help them to get to the point where they are forced to think about talent. They're forced to think about profits. They're forced to think about future customers. So this is a business imperative. This is not a nice thing to do from a human resources standpoint. It's a business imperative. And so I help our leaders to get there by just having deeper conversations and asking open-ended questions, because I need them to lead and drive the results, not me. I'm setting the strategy from the top, but I'm expecting every leader in our organization to lead in this space, just like they would in business decisions around the windows and doors and how we're going to manufacture them. So that's how I would look at this.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I think so folks who are listening, I think it is a good thing to do, a nice thing to do, but making that business case is going to take us further along and more sustainable, which is a great segue to you, Greg, because you are a business leader. So talk to us a little bit about your journey and why you, as the vice president and treasurer, are here today.
Yeah, well, thank you. I am, it's kind of funny because I obviously represent the stereotype of the insurance industry, right? I mean, I am that person. And so, I think like Holly, the murder of George Floyd was an absolute change for us. And as a company, I remember pretty clearly a year ago, having our morning SLT meeting, and we do that every morning at 9:00. And just that conversation that we had, and to say, this one obviously is different and it should be different. And so how are we as an organization going to respond to this? And our president sent out an email after we kind of discussed it as a group. And he basically laid out that we are going to be committed to taking action, and we are going to make an impactful change in the communities that we serve. We're going to respectfully listen. We're going to have meaningful conversations, and we're going to help initiate and support that positive change. And I think the cool thing is that one email was so well received by our employees. And I think you could feel his passion. I think hopefully that the rest of the company can understand the support that our senior leaders are giving to us, because I think ultimately, kind of like Tracy is saying, there are so many benefits that we'll get into later with another one of your questions, but there are so many things that this could have been a flashpoint that was prioritized maybe for a little bit of time and then pushed off to the back burner, and kind of like so many initiatives that happen. But this one not only has remained important to us, but is now a part of our strategy going forward. It is a part of our fabric of IMT and what we're going to push forward. And I think that's the biggest thing, right, is to make sure that you have that buy-in, to make sure, and that's really what prompted us to start, was to make sure that we could affect that change. And it really starts with the buy-in from not only senior leaders, but then ultimately all the employees in your organization.
Thank you for touching on, I think all of you touched on this importance of commitment from the top level. Interest to do DI work can come from various levels. Tracy pointed out so appropriately, we have all kinds of employees, but if there's commitment from the top, I think this becomes a little bit more successful. So thank you for sharing that with our audience. So let's talk a little bit about what would you like to see? What are some benefits you're trying to see from the program? What would you expect, at the end? What does success look like to you? Same order, easier that way.
Okay, same order. So we're actually we have a meeting next week to start looking at outlining kind of our next steps in our action plan. So I don't know that we have specific concrete goals at this point. But from a really high level, we want to make sure that we are inclusive as a workplace. So looking at our policies, our handbook, our hiring practices, see if there's any gaps, anything that we're really missing in being an inclusive workplace. We don't have a lot of diversity on our staff, on our board. So getting people in, getting the right people in the room, getting the right people at the table, like making some changes in terms of the makeup of our staff. We do have some positions open, so I will just put in a plug for that. There's some openings listed on our website. And we want to make sure that we're focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion with our membership. So making sure that as far as the girls we serve, reaching more girls, and also making sure that we're providing resources and tools for our troop leaders to have these conversations with the girls. So that's a huge level of impact. And I also just want to go back to what Tracy said about the business imperative piece. So right on one hand, doing this kind of work, being inclusive, being welcoming, it's very much just in the makeup of our organization. It aligns with our mission as a nonprofit. But at the same time, to be a sustainable nonprofit, we need members, and we need to reach more members. And if there's populations that we're not reaching, and families that aren't connecting with us, and girls that don't feel welcome, then that also impacts our business. So I think that's not necessarily what prompted this at Girl Scouts, but absolutely it's part of what's going to keep sustaining this work and making sure it's a priority.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because a lot of times we don't think nonprofits have to think about the business case, right? But still, there is sustainability piece. Like if your community is growing, if your populations are growing, if your demographics are shifting, if you're going to have more millennials coming into the workforce, how do we get to them? That is still a business case, right? So thank you for touching on that, Holly. Tracy?
Yeah, so success for Anderson Windows and Doors. Our commitment in this space is to have an inclusive and diverse workplace where all of our employees feel respected, valued, and driven to realize their full potential. So to me, it's about each employee being able to come into the organization and reach the full potential that he or she has. So for us to be able to reach this potential, we need to create a culture of inclusion. We need everyone to build organizational capability. We need our leaders driving for a result. And then we also need to have inclusive practices, policies, and procedures. And so when we think about it and frame it up that way, us having the inclusive work environment is the most important piece of this, because once you show that you have inclusivity, all the other pieces have to fall into place. So it's not enough to just say we are going to attract talent, but we want to attract diverse talent. We want to be able to leverage that talent for business value. We also want everybody to be able to reach their full potential. Success for us is leaders driving for these results, not human resources. but our leaders driving for results. And one of the things that we've done to help ourselves get there, and Sanjita, you were able to participate in this, but we certified 74 individuals to become mini CDOs, mini Chief Diversity Officers in the company. They're going to integrate this into the day-to-day operations of the business. So these are business leaders that we've taken through the program, through the Society of Diversity, to be certified, to understand the broadness of and the complexity of this work. And so to show what success is when we have that organization where everyone can reach their full potential.
I love that, Tracy. If I may just take a minute to share with everybody just a little bit more about that. Tracy's organization was able to, when I was in the call, we had about 30 individuals, but you were saying 70 individuals have.
Yeah.
So it's actually a certification program that we're offering here locally, certified diversity professional and certified diversity executive. So Tracy, what Tracy mentioned, let's take away as a best practice is not enough for one person to do this job. It's not enough. It cannot always be it's Tracy's job to help our organization be diverse and inclusive. That's just not going to work, right, Tracy? Now you have an army of leaders who have the right tools and knowledge to do what you want all of us to do together, and think about the momentum we're going to be gaining. And so please take that and think about that as a takeaway and a best practice to advance diversity, equity, inclusion in your own organizations. I found it incredibly, first of all, I was like, unbelievable. I don't think I've seen any other organization who put 70 of their leaders through a certification program for diversity. And that's incredible, Tracy. I just want to applaud your organization for doing that and for you to lead that. Greg, coming to you about sharing a little bit about what does a vision of success look like for INT?
Yep, fantastic. And I applaud that too, Tracy. That is really a cool thing. I think, for us, in order to see benefits and where we needed to go, I think I need to just briefly mention sort of how we got started. And Sanjita, you were instrumental in that, and coming in and talking to our leadership group and just kind of helping us start along that journey. And we can get into that later in more specifics. But I think it's important for everyone to just kind of understand, obviously, in order to see benefit, you have to prioritize and emphasize it. You have to get started. So for us, at IMT especially, we, like I mentioned earlier, we're a Midwestern Iowa Midwest company. We have always valued family. I've worked at IMT for almost 28 years. And so I've grown up in that family, and I have some of my best friends that work here. And I think, we've always talked about in glowing terms of what our family looks like. This is our family. Even our company slogan is "Be Worry-Free with IMT." So I think what became pretty apparent is, even though we emphasize family, even though we emphasize all that, were we really creating that culture where people could come in and be their authentic selves, whatever that may be or whatever that may look like? And even though we felt like we were providing a welcoming thing, I think it was very much an eye-opener to know that we did have employees, policyholders, agents who maybe felt that they were from a marginalized population and could not be their authentic selves. And that was painful. And so we, one of the things, there was a catchphrase that our HRVP shared with us in her early on when we were talking about this initiative. And it stuck with me. It's diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and belonging is the outcome. And that just really rang true for me, especially the inclusion part, right? Because the first ones, I think, many of us acknowledge that diversity is there. Equity seems, like in our case, it was a no-brainer, but were we really taking that step of acting on the inclusion piece? Were we being purposeful in how we portrayed ourselves, in how we were trying to build the culture of our organization? Was it truly as inclusive? Was it truly as welcoming as what we wanted it to be? And so I think, for us, that really just boils down to being extremely purposeful, not only in the future, right, where our strategy goes, but the benefits are obviously very clear. The engagement of your employees, which is one of our core values. If you have engaged employees, they're effective. They're pushing your business strategies, your initiatives, ultimately your success forward. It's almost going to feel like it doesn't even take any effort. It's like when an engine is just working at full capacity and really going well. And so absolutely that is a benefit that we're looking forward to. We're already starting to see some of the fruits of that, but we fully anticipate, over the coming months and years for that to just become a bigger snowball effect and really help us not only with our initiatives, like I said, but ultimately even bottom line and profitability. You just can't ignore that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Greg. And I want to take another minute to just applaud IMT on their journey. This is, folks, another best practice you're seeing right here. Somebody who is not a DEI person, somebody who is not a CDO, a Chief Diversity Officer, somebody who's not a Chief Diversity Manager, for Greg to be able to come and talk about this authentically, and it is another best practice. And IMT did everything right. They consulted with me initially. They do have a position for a manager out there. I don't know if you filled that position, but I think it was a director level position for DEI. And so I think it takes time, it takes homework, and but also leaders being able to talk about DEI in the same way that DEI person like Tracy and I would, is another best practice, and it's really commendable what you're doing. So I just want to take a minute to applaud IMT and their journey as well, but also for organizations on the call who are thinking about this, who are in that journey and saying, we want to do something. We want to start somewhere. Where do I start? Where are the resources? I do provide those one-on-one consultation for your companies. We can spend some time. We did that with IMT. We did that with Girl Scouts. And I sit down with you and I talk with you about where you're at, and I give you some pointers and some guidance for the journey. And so please feel free to reach out to me. So all of you have done this work a little bit. All of you are in a little bit of a different place in the journey. But talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the the challenges or roadblocks that you've faced, just for our listeners, just so they can think about that as they are going into the journey, and hopefully have it right, know what they're getting into, think about some of these challenges and obstacles that may come along the way. This is not an easy work, and I'm sure you had some pushback. I'm sure you had some pushback from the big stakeholder group. The employees is one stakeholder group, but you have a board, you have customers, you have, a lot of different individuals to please. And so, Holly, even though you are in the initial phases, did you have any challenges? Did you have any pushback? What are some of those, and how did you overcome them? What are some of the lessons learned?
Sure. Yeah, we've definitely had some challenges, I would say. And the first was really just that knowing how to get started, right? And like I said, we just sort of put out an open, transparent invitation to all staff to form a committee. But even some of that, we ended up having some really great discussions, like people, were willing to ask questions. I mean, again, we don't have a very diverse staff. So a lot of these conversations were mostly white women talking about diversity and trying to figure out what we needed to do better. So there's that getting started piece, just kind of like spinning our wheels a little bit at the beginning. So the next step was really to realize that we needed some outside help, that we needed to talk to some experts. So we had an initial conversation with Sanjita, and then we ended up partnering with a local diversity consultant. And I'm sure many of you know that people that do that kind of work are in very high demand in the last year. So we've got this great partnership, and we've now been working on some of those things like surveying our staff, surveying our stakeholders, and starting to put together that action plan. So again, that meeting is on Tuesday, so we've got a lot of work coming up in this space. So the other thing I would say is just making sure that this work is prioritized. So we are a nonprofit. We have a lean staff that everybody wears a lot of hats, and we don't have a position specifically focused on this. So it is really just people stepping up and taking an interest in doing this work on top of their full-time jobs. So just making sure that it doesn't slide through the cracks. It is a challenge because we do have a lot going on every day at our organization, but we've just really been trying to do the best we can there. And our leadership team has prioritized having time for DEI related conversations at all of our strategic meetings. So it's definitely not a quick fix, not something we've been implementing very quickly, easily, things like that. But, just making any progress in this space is I guess, better than we were doing before. So.
I was trying to figure out what am I going to say here, because there's so many obstacles and challenges, right, that are happening in the organization. An obstacle and a challenge that's also an opportunity. That's how we're looking at all of these. So our industry is white, it's male, and that's it. That's the industry. Okay. So because of that, we have to do a little extra work in order to go and find diverse talent, which means we need to build partnership. We need to build relationship. We need to help our leaders to understand you can't just show up and say you're Anderson at a historical Black college and think people are just going to sign up for, your interviews panel. You have to go build relationships in diverse communities. In some communities, you can't just walk into a community and say, hey, I have 1,500 jobs open. Anybody wants a job? No, you have to go talk to the leaders of that particular community. So for us, it's really helping to build that cultural competence in leaders. It's also shifting our culture. Our culture is really shifting. It's shifting because we want to become a more inclusive organization. We feel that every employee has a role to play in this space. All of us have the responsibilities to make sure that we are in an inclusive culture. One of the obstacles is that the Office of Inclusion is moving faster than the organization is ready to move. So we're having to pause, slow down, come back, and help pick up the organization and help them to continue to move forward. We still have a business to run. This is not the first priority. The first priority are profits. We have a board of directors. We have a family. We're a privately owned business. We're a privately owned company. And so we have responsibilities to our customers. So how do we make sure that there's alignment and that we're moving at the pace that the organization is ready to move? There have been challenges from some customers that don't like some of the direction that we're taking. There have been a couple of customers doing this month of Pride. So June is coming up. We have Pride, we have Juneteenth, we have Black Music Month. And we've been very active on our social media channels with our messages of inclusion. And there are customers that don't like some of the places that we are saying that we're going to be more inclusive in. I think another big challenge for us is we have metrics. I can tell you who's come into the organization, who's left the organization. I also own talent acquisition in our company. So I'm the Chief Diversity Officer, but I also own talent acquisition. So I have all the metrics that go along with everything that we need to look at, right? As an organization to know how well we're doing. I know the promotional rates. I know where there are gaps. And I'll tell you about an organization that we're working with to help us to determine some of this stuff as well. But because of that, and because we're private, we're not as transparent as our employees might want. They're asking for data, they're asking for information, and it's not data that we're publicly sharing. You can't go onto websites and get information about our financials. So it's important for us to think about this from that lens. The last thing that I'll say as a challenge is we have now 10 employee resource groups. We call them employee resource networks. These networks started as a grassroots efforts for us in the company. And I am trying to move those employee resource networks from networks into business resource groups. They are going to help us brand ourselves in diverse communities. They're going to help us to attract talent to the organization that we didn't have a talent pipeline into. They're able to help us with providing training and development, that our training and development department doesn't have time to do. But I'm sure the LGBTQ Pride Plus group can go go and put together a really nice presentation on what the pronouns mean, for an example, to be able to help individuals continue to develop and learn. I'll stop at that point for obstacles and challenges at this time. We're working through them. And wait, this is the great thing about this. Like, we were just we didn't nominate. We were recognized by Forbes as one of the best companies for diversity. And this is on the 2021 list for the work that we did in 2020 during a pandemic. We were able to, and this is not something we applied for and said, we want to apply. This is the work that they've done independently in talking to our employees that we've been able to receive this award. So even though there are challenges, you can't give up. This work is hard every day. Behavior changes that you're trying to make. It is some hard work, but the rewards are there and it's fruitful.
That is very amazing, Tracy. And again, I can't get over the fact that you're a doors and windows company, but yet, and so to our listeners, to everybody, if doors and windows can do it, we all can do it, I guess. That's my takeaway.
And we're the best doors and windows company there is. So if you need doors and windows for your home, please look at Anderson Windows and Doors.
Okay, so yes, please. I know that there's something that you said that I want to pick on, but I also don't want to take time from Greg. So quickly, Tracy, there's something really important that you talked about, which happens all the time in DEI work, which is we can't get everybody to agree on this work. We can't get 100% customers, employees, board members. What's the strategy? What should we do? You talked about, being active on social media for Pride, and you already know that you have a percentage of customers, and hopefully I'm thinking it's a smaller percentage, but what can companies do? What should we do? What's the strategy there?
Stay the course. So our CEO is on board. Our CEO has made the statement, if we lose some customers behind this, we lose some customers behind this. But his statement is, we're going to do the right thing. And so he's leading out loud. And that's not me, that's he. Our CEO, Jay Lunn, is leading out loud with this work. He is saying we're going to be an anti-racist company. He's saying that all people should be able to come to this company and be able to achieve and reach their fullest potential. He's saying this is going to be a change for us in the company. So he's out front with those messages. And so have clear messages, have concise messages, and have a clear strategy and direction of where you're going.
Love it. Thank you. And again, best practice for audience, you're listening, taking notes. Organizations can make anything happen that they believe in and they trust in, then they're going to say, this is a priority of ours. And I've heard other organizations say this. We may sometimes lose some customers, and I've heard them say, their words, not mine, maybe they're not the ones we need. And so with that, I'll pass it on to Greg.
I think that's so true. Just to echo Tracy, so often we use that phrase, starts at the top, right? But with this, I truly believe maybe it doesn't start there, but it absolutely has to have the full support of the top. And that means literally your president, your CEO of your company, your organization. Without that, the rest of it just becomes a little more difficult than it already is to achieve. So I applaud that. That's awesome, because we actually have the same support and commitment and drive from the top of our organization, which makes it so much easier for the rest of us. I would say from an obstacle standpoint, very similar to what Holly started with, even Tracy. I mean, there's so many to name, but for us, it was knowing where and how to start. We had never obviously prioritized. We always knew, right, that equity, that inclusion, all that was important. But, I'm a very old ex-athlete, emphasis on old and ex. But I had a coach that told us once upon a time, if you want to get better at something, you have to emphasize it. So if you want to field ground balls better, go out and field ground balls. Well, if we were going to get better at DEI, we needed to emphasize it. We had to prioritize it. It had to become a part of our strategy and something that we could have ongoing. So after that conversation with Sanjita, and she's right, we do have a position out there, hopefully for a director of our DEI initiative. But in the meantime, we had a committee that we just put some employees on that were committed, interested, wanted to help the rest of us learn more. And what was really, what really hit this home for me was hearing that group of employees who were already employees of IMT, who we all knew, who we all cared for, we looked at as family members, but to hear them come with their individual stories and show that vulnerability to who they were and who they are and how they wanted to fit into IMT and how IMT could help them fit in and be their authentic selves, and ultimately for us to be our best company, that to me was life-changing. And I'm one who has a mentally handicapped sister, and I've always prided myself, on trying to have that open heart and that open mind. But that was game-changing, and that was vulnerable. And you can't ignore, right, the obstacles that might exist when you have your fellow employees being that vulnerable and that sharing and saying with honesty, hey, this is who I am. This is what I face. Here's what I can bring to the table. Here's how you as an organization or we as an organization can help. And so I think to me, that was one of the things that helps me get over the obstacles. That group has brought an action plan to us month by month by month of things that they would like to do, whether it's Black History, whether it's LGBTQ+, Pride Month, whatever that may be. And they were looking obviously for support. And so even before they talked, but certainly after they talked, that support was just apparent and needed to be. And so I would agree, that any employees or customers of ours, that aren't fully committed or at least understand why we're doing it, right? We can't change who they are. All we can do is say, this is the type of organization we want to be. And when you come in these doors, we want you to understand that. We want you to understand why we are doing this and who we want to be as a company and how we're going to support our communities and how we're going to support our employees. And if that's not for you, well, then that's okay. That's your choice. And you can go choose a happier place for you to be. But this is who we're going to be. And I think when you kind of fall back on all of that, really does help remove any obstacles that you thought, any fear you might have. I always had that internal fear that I was going to say or do the wrong thing. And I was going to let somebody else maybe do my education for me and then train me on what to say and what to do. And I had a good conversation with Kai Gillespie, who I know is on this call. And, she just basically said, it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to educate yourself after making that mistake and just make sure that you do your best to not continue that and make those same mistakes again. And I think that's really important to understand when you're really trying to overcome obstacles. If you have that grace and you have somebody telling you that, then there's really no reason to not try to overcome those.
I love everything you said, Greg. Oftentimes, I think Tim touched on this when in his opening remarks, that it is not a zero-sum game. Like if we're doing DEI, it's for everybody. And I think when you were talking, what I got out of it was we may not be super diverse the way we want to be now, but still there's diversity within our organization in terms of life experiences, in terms of people around us, where we all have some connection to someone who's dealing with an illness or have, a sibling or a child of disability or, a friend or somebody who is in the LGBTQ community. And it doesn't always have to be race, ethnicity, gender, which is all good. But even then you still have this focus on people, which sometimes I feel like organizations miss. We say people are important, but what do we actually do to make them really feel welcome and included? And so I think those are things I got out of what you just said from your journey. And I know I'm looking at our clock. We are very close to our time. I just want to encourage participants to either put your questions in the chat or raise your hand if you want to unmute and speak. And before going to breakout, maybe I'll ask this one last question for all of you panelists. What advice would you have for organizations who were in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 earlier when we did the poll on where we're starting? Like, what would you say? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I'll add that I'm glad we actually didn't switch the order, because then I can listen to Tracy and Greg without thinking about what I'm going to say. So this has worked out for me. So I guess the first thing that I would say is just to start, no matter where you are as an organization. Now is the time to start. there is clearly a lot of work to do in this country, in Iowa, in Des Moines, to make sure that workplaces are fair and equitable. And I think we've all touched on, the momentum over the last year. And there are so many conversations happening. There are so many resources. There's really just no reason not to get started. And, it's the same way that you get better as at anything. Figure out where you are now, figure out where you want to be, and figure out how to get there. And plug for Sangeeta as a great resource to help you start to look at some of those questions, to look at, what your organizational values are, and is that reflected in your reality, and what it means to get there. So that's my quick advice.
Yeah, my favorite quote here, Holly, is a good time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, but another good time to plant a tree is right now, right today. So no, it's always a good time to start. Tracy?
It's important to educate. People are in different places, have had different experiences, and see through different lens. And so education is so important. It's also important to start with realistic goals. Don't bite off, 25 different initiatives in this space. Create a clear strategy and communicate what that strategy is. Build brand awareness for the company, build talent pipelines, but be able to tie everything that you do back to business results and metrics. This is not something that's done on the side. This is a part of. An example of that would be talent succession planning. When we decided to understand how we could make diversity a part of our talent succession planning, when I already mentioned that we're a white male dominant organization, right? But we have women and people from all backgrounds. What we ask individuals to do for these positions that we look at for succession planning is not only do you have the person that you're grooming, but add a woman, add a person of color, and choose any other dimension of diversity that you want to choose, so that you're grooming 4 people for a position. It gives us bench strength. It gives us an opportunity to move people around on the chessboard. It gives us an opportunity to help promote people. It gives us a stronger organization. And so try new things. We are going to fail at some things, but at least try new things. And I've never talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion as much as I have with people that are not like me, that don't look like me, than I have in this last year. So also take the time to pause, reflect, listen, and then act. It's not for people to decide when it's time to move on. Our organizations and our people in our organizations will tell us when.
Awesome. I think I already heard you say something earlier, like fear, I heard, which a lot of people have gone into this work. But it's okay to make mistakes. I heard the CEO of Ben & Jerry's ice cream talking about businesses make mistakes all the time. Like, how many times have we come up with a new product or a plan and we've failed, right? And so this is something similar. We cannot be afraid of failing and sit on the sidelines and being afraid of, talking about it. And Greg, another thing I took away that you were talking about is you have an ally within your organization who you can go to and say, what am I doing? Am I doing okay? Am I doing right? I heard you talk about your colleague. So just wanted to point out those 2 as best practices, but please share us your thoughts.
Yeah, I really just have a couple maybe things to share with what Holly and Tracy said. And I think, for us, it was just literally knowing where to start, which resources to go out to help us get started, right? I mean, you only know what you know, but I think the other part of that is being honest with yourself and where you're at. Don't be embarrassed if you haven't begun. Don't be embarrassed if you're on step 1 or if you're on step 100. It's okay if we don't all have Tracy on our staff, right? We don't all have somebody who is that well versed. So understanding, exactly where you're at, being honest. That way you will get started. That won't be a barrier to saying, well, you know what, I think we missed this boat and somebody else is way ahead of us. That it's okay. And like Sangeeta's thing, you just plant the tree wherever you're at, plant the tree, get started and push on from there, and then reach out to people like this. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, right? We are we are Central Iowa, or Iowans for the most part. We're willing to help each other out. We want to help each other out. And I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding where your resource base can be and taking advantage of that, and being willing. So those would be the only things I would add to that, Sanjita.
Awesome. I want to ask all of us to give a round of applause to our wonderful panel for sharing their time and thoughts and being courageous and vulnerable. We're not all perfect, but we're in this journey. And I think there was a lot I learned from each one of your journey. And I hope some of our listeners are getting some of that as well. So please continue to, in the interest of time, we're not going to go to comments, but please feel free to keep your questions in the chat if you have any, and would be happy to take some of them. Let's see, maybe we have 5 more minutes to, we're at 2:01, we can go to breakout room in 2:05 is what we had. So I think let me quickly look at the chat to see if there is anything in there that I really need to address. Nick Goose, our council member, as always, has shared some wonderful comments and resources in the chat box. Please feel free to take a look at them. My boss, my colleague, Marvin Dijer, has dropped in links for the certification program that we talked about. Please take a look at them and reach out. We talked about reaching out to me if you're interested in talking through what your organizational journey might look like. So I don't know if I missed any of, I think there's a echoing of don't expect these in the margins to educate you on DEI. So, okay, if anyone has any other information, anything in questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Thank you very much for panelists for sharing with us. And now we are going to go to our breakout rooms where we will be able to chat a little bit more. I will just ask of my council members and staff to be in different rooms and be facilitators and note takers. And if we don't have a council member or a staff, I'd ask one of participants to volunteer to kind of jot some notes. But in the breakout room, we're just going to talk a little bit about what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you? Why were you here today? Why is this conversation important to you? Where's your organization? How are you involved in that journey? And some of the terms, what does microaggression or concepts? We're going to skip that one because we didn't send you the readout. And what questions or resources do you need from the partnership to help you in the journey? So my colleague, Mike Jefferson, if you are ready, please send us to the breakout rooms.
Sanjita, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment where someone was talking about don't expect those in the margins to educate you on DEI. As you start these things, keep in mind, be patient on both sides. As a person of color, I'm on the Commission on Native American Affairs, and I have argued and educated and explained the Native American, from my point of view, statistics and points. So you get to a bit of fatigue, and now there's a lot of momentum behind it, but the perception can be that this just started. This hasn't been a constant civil rights movement type thing. So be patient when there's a little bit of fatigue, when we're like, oh, here we go again. Nobody's being negative. It's just people have argued and fought on this. And be patient on the other side, because now a lot more people are interested. They're finding out more. But at the same time, they can get a little defensive, because everything's been so polarized and it gets twisted in the media and the public and grandpa's view and your uncle's view and neighbor's view. So we need to be patient on both sides. I firmly believe for the first time in my life, there's, a really good, solid, authentic effort, to go towards equity. So I appreciate it, but we need to be patient on both sides. So just want to
thank you for adding that, Tim. Appreciate it. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, everybody. I know this was 1.5 hours of your whole day. Karen, thanks for laughing with us. So just in the last 10 minutes we got, again, I really want to thank our panelists for taking all that time. Just a few other housekeeping items. We have recorded this, obviously, as you've noticed. We will be sending this out after it's ready to be sent out, and feel free to use it. Feel free to share it within your organizations, with your colleagues, with your leaders. Sometimes there are different individuals who need to listen to this, right? And if they were not here, if you're like, oh, somebody should have been here and they missed it, there will be that opportunity for you. But also in this last minute, maybe a few minutes we have, we want to be here for you. We are in this journey together. The partnership, we know this is a regional effort. And each organization, while you have your own DEI efforts, we will make headway, and if we all move both steer our boat in the same direction. And so please continue to let us know. Please feel free to put that in the chat if you already have that idea of what is it that you would like to hear about next? What are you struggling with? And then we will be sending out a quick survey. We are very mindful of measuring our own impact of the work that we're doing. And so we will be sending out a survey. Please take a few minutes. We don't have many questions in there. This will help us continue to learn and grow and improve our programming. I do want to thank all of my council members who are here. So many of them, obviously, Tim and Becky have done a lot of work behind the scene to get us here and help us come to get future events. And then we have Mary and Amber and Karen and Micah. So many individuals here who make this happen every day. Erica Costa. I want to thank all of you for your time and commitment to the Council Negus. But the last minute, anybody else want to maybe open it up for any last questions, comments, thoughts in the last 8 minutes or so we have?
Cindy, oh, sorry.
Annie.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask one thing, because it kind of goes along the lines of what Negus had mentioned. I think he had a question earlier on just how to make individuals feel comfortable who are from some of these more, not, I would say, forefront backgrounds or diverse backgrounds. As organizations start to implement and things change and shift and some things get unearthed that maybe conversations weren't had in the past, how are some ways that we can provide safe spaces for those individuals to really voice concerns or frustrations, especially when this is something that they've dealt with within the organization and it's kind of being stirred up at this point. That's something we talked about a little bit in our group as well, but any ideas from anybody?
Tracy, I'm going to ask you, you were about to say something anyways, so maybe we can rely on you.
Yeah, one of the things that I would say is it's a part of onboarding. Is one place that you can start. And how are you going to onboard people into the organization, especially now since we are in this COVID-19 pandemic and some organizations are not fully back to work and some of your staff is, but stepping back and thinking about how you're going to onboard the program. An allyship program is one that would be phenomenal in starting across the organization. And allyship is for any dimension of diversity. Another place is in creating these employee resource networks or employee resource groups. We all have, the hotlines that people can call into and share information anonymously, but it's building those relationships internally to know where to go.
Any other panelists who want to chime in? Oh, Tracy, please continue, sorry.
Let the other panelists go.
Do we still have Holly? I don't see her in my screen. Maybe she's in the next.
She's there.
Okay. Any other panelists want to chime in on that?
I am still here, but I don't have anything to add there beyond what Tracy said.
No problem, Greg.
I'd agree, Sanjita. I mean, I think, Tracy probably has as good an answer for that as any of us. We haven't been real purposeful along that, but absolutely understand the question and have been jotting down what Tracy's been saying. So absolutely.
Tim, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just going to add that another really good one that has worked at different places I've been is mentorship. But don't put someone who's the same group. That's, you're not expanding anything. They're having the same issues and, it can feed on each other. Actually get a commitment from management all the way up to groom somebody below them, and it's best that they're comfortable, try to mix up the mentorship, make them get, people have to kind of get out of their comfort zone a little bit, but that's the other way you find out about what's going on in the company. They build a relationship and they go, when I first started here, this happened or that happened, or, hey, I didn't hear about that job, because you find out that your networks are narrow. Women are only talking to women in executive things and sharing stuff. Jobs are getting talked about at lunch when everybody can't go, or, opportunities. So mentorship can make a really big difference.
Yeah. Well, I just added, thank you for adding that, Tim. I'll just add a few things, Danny. I think this is the whole purpose, right? At the end of the day, how can we make everybody in the organization feel welcomed and belonged? And the less of one group of people you are, the less marginalized, the more marginalized you feel, and the more uncomfortable you feel to talk, you feel to share your ideas. And so this is going to be that journey. And, I love Dr. Martin Luther King's quote that says, we fear each other because we don't know each other. We don't know each other because we have not taken the time to learn about each other. And oftentimes it's because we're really not taking the time to, what's your culture like? What makes you feel comfortable? What are you doing? How do you react to this issue? What can we do to make you feel more comfortable? It's a journey, right? And so I think in my organization, we've started the learning is very important. Having a common understanding of what diversity is, what equity is, what inclusion is, having a common vernacular is very important, because individually, let's face it, all of us are in a different place. Somebody is really advanced, somebody is in the middle, and somebody's out there, not started the journey, right? And so how do we do this? Is because if the organization makes it a priority that we all come together and learn about these facts and topics every month. And one of the common mistakes I see people do or organizations do is one-off trainings. Let's bring in a speaker. Let's do an unconscious bias training. And folks, that does not work. It has to be an ongoing process. We have to build off of each other, our learning. We can't talk about race without having the foundation. It can be divisive. It will be detrimental. Okay. And so, Mary, go ahead.
No, Sanjita, I know there's a question in the chat box that I wanted you to hit on before we ran out of time. Sure. For the CDP, does that allow us to train others in our organization?
You will have a great understanding and learning, and you will be able to lead the work effectively, is what I would say. Tracy, would you add something to that? Because you have put 70 people through the certification.
I think it's giving you a great foundation and a common language to think about the work in. And so, yes, you'll be able to translate and help others, but until they go through it themselves and get the deeper understanding, then maybe not. There's one other thing that I just wanted to bring up. We're all in this work together. None of us are out here by ourselves. There's a great organization called CEO Action. And if your CEO commits and you join it, you're committing to have a more inclusive work environment. And there are so many tools and resources and ideas out there and groups that you can join to be able to get information and to continue to develop and learn.
Yeah. So 2 things quickly last minute. We also have started our own CEO roundtable here locally. We had our first roundtable this morning where about 120 CEOs participated. And so it's like a local version of CEOs in Action. So feel free to check the CEOs in Action. But if your CEO is involved it's a peer learning group. CEOs need their own space to learn about this, right? And we've all talked about if CEOs are in this journey, they can articulate this work, they can do what Greg is doing and not rely on, hey, let's bring in my CDO all the time. It's going to be more successful. And so please look into that. We'll send you that information in our follow-up email. But I have this analogy in my head where, to Tracy's point, where you have more allies doing, common language and all that is, I always think about playing tennis and thinking about if you're an expert and you're playing with a beginner, how frustrating that is, that experience is. And if you have an ability to play with an equal level, it's going to be a much more easier play and fun play. And so with that, I know we are right at 2:30 and I want to really, Becky, I do want to give Becky and Tim the last minute to close us out and wrap us up with your comments, please. Becky, go ahead.
And that's not why I was raising my hand. I just wanted to point out that we did have another question as well. And I know we're short on time, but I'm hoping then that the panelists, Sanjita, that you can capture that question and have the panelists email that individual with their response on how they would, or you could email it to everybody so that we all have the answer to that question.
Thank you for pointing that out. It's hard to multitask, but Tim, would you please share your last words and close this out today?
Well, we always try to end all of our programs with some type of call to action. And the call to you is start getting involved in DEI. We've addressed being afraid, some barriers, but the big thing is you have a big, huge resource with the partnership and the Inclusion Council. So my call to action is just email us and make sure you get networked in, and we can share all the resources, speakers. We have plenty of diverse people, subject matter expert, nonprofits, different programs, and we can be a huge help to you, and we want to be. So the more we work together, the easier it'll be. So thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.